You could hit this thing with a hammer and not break it.
Ready? On today's episode of Tech Review Tuesday, we're going to be asking one simple question, which is, which smartwatch is the best smartwatch? And I do want to apologize for not having this week's Tech Review Tuesday intro complete. Dan, who does the intro, is out of town. We'll get you next week. Before I get into the specifics of each watch, a little context.
This is it.
So that is the smartwatch spectrum. On one end, to be extreme, is simply a watch. This just tells the time. Doesn't do anything else. Doesn't even tell me the date. Just the time. On the other end is a fully fledged wrist computer. And then in the middle you have like a fitness, sports-focused watch. And then what I think is probably the best competitor to the Apple Watch. That's the spectrum. Now, before I get into the intimacies of each device, there's another major factor to keep in mind as context when considering a smartwatch, and that is how much of a pain in the ass are they for what they give you in return.
No additional alignment.
And there is a very literal, inversely proportional rationale to how much a smartwatch can do versus how much you have to, how much of a pain in the ass it is.
Contact document confirmed.
So here's how the smartwatch analysis will be taking place. I'll be testing the watch's build quality, ecosystem, capability, and battery. And this will include a regular watch, the Garmin Fenix 5 Plus, the Apple Watch 4 44mm, and the big size Galaxy Watch.
Now, really, the reason why I included a regular watch in this is because it just sort of acts as a control.
Build quality.
First up on build is the Fenix 5 Plus. The build quality is excellent on this thing. It does have a crystal face like the Apple Watch. Beyond that, all the way around, it's all stainless steel. This is my old one. And you see it's a little bit scratched up, a little bit weathered, but these things are tough. So overall, very good build quality on the Garmin.
So our control, the regular watch, build quality is very high. The Garmin's build quality, I would say, is incredibly robust, good looking, and just generally
This is it.
top notch.
Now the Series 4 Apple Watch, this thing is truly stunning. Like, to hold in your hands does feel like you're holding a piece of jewelry.
Look at that action. Smooth.
You could tell Johnny Ives just like polished this thing clean. Very impressed with the build quality of the Apple Watch. My previous Apple Watch, this is the Generation 3 Apple Watch, it exploded. I mean, it literally exploded. What I think happened is some salt water got under the screen, battery expanded, screen popped off, but it shattered. These things are not built as tough as, say, a watch that looks like this.
The Apple Watch is extremely beautiful. Doesn't feel as tough as the Garmin.
Next up is the Galaxy Watch. I will say the new Galaxy Watch has a certain heft to it. It's stainless steel. It feels dense. Compared to the old Galaxy Gear watches, it has a great weight to it. It feels really solid. The bottom on this is plastic. It does feel a little bit, I don't know, it feels less jewelry-like and more electronics like when you feel that, but it still has a substantial feel to it, and the mechanics on it feel great. You hear that?
The Galaxy Watch does have the weight of the stainless steel, which is beautiful. Overall, I've got to give it to the Fenix 5 with the best build. You could hit this thing with a hammer and not break it.
This is it.
Just kidding.
Next up is the ecosystem. Starting with our control watch, this is just a watch. It doesn't have an ecosystem. There's no ecosystem. None. Next up is the Fenix 5. Now, you can download new watch faces on the app, and I think you can maybe download some apps for it and stuff, but they're not super robust, and a lot of the watch faces you can download are a little bit janky. Installing them is a little bit complicated. So there is some ecosystem, not a great ecosystem. One thing it does well, though, for athletes is that the data that this collects does communicate with your other exercise apps like Strava or whatever. It does that very well. So that's kind of the only plus I would give this when it comes to ecosystem.
This is an area where the Apple Watch really thrives.
And that ecosystem, well, it wasn't, but after 4 years, the ecosystem is now what you would expect from Apple. And when you look to the new heart rate features that this has, the EKG features that this has, I imagine that the ecosystem around this will only get more and more robust.
And the Galaxy Watch does have an impressive ecosystem.
This is a watch that's designed mainly for use with Android devices, like your Galaxy Notes or whatever it is that you use. But this doesn't use Android's Watch OS or whatever the hell it's called. This uses a proprietary operating system that is owned by Samsung called Tizen. While I think the operating system is really amazing on this, it is limited in its ecosystem because the only watches that carry it are these Samsung watches.
One caveat that I would say there about the Galaxy Watch that's kind of frustrating about the Apple Watch is that the Apple Watch doesn't allow third-party developers to design watch faces for it, so it's pretty limited. The Galaxy Watch does allow third-party developers to make faces for it, so there's a broader selection here. I don't know why Apple's so limiting.
Capability. This is where I want to spend most of the time because I think this is what differentiates these 4 devices. See, spoiler alert, I don't know that I can say one is better than the other, so it really depends on what your needs are. With that, if you don't need a computer strapped to your wrist, then you just get a damn watch. You never have to think about it. It always tells you the time. Now, if you want some smart capabilities, well, this is why I like the Garmin watch, because for me, it gives you the bare minimum of what you would kind of want. So when you get a phone call, it shows up on here. You can't answer it on here. You can't talk on here. Same with text messages. It shows you the full text message on here. Beyond that, when it comes to athletics, I want my heart rate, I want my distance measured, I want maps, and this does all of that and does that incredibly well. So the capabilities on this watch are vastly superior to just a regular old dumb watch, but they aren't quite as robust as like a full-fledged smartwatch. This watch is basically a miniaturized iPhone strapped to your wrist. And that could be a good thing or that could be a bad thing. I will say historically, I've gotten 2 Apple Watches before, but I've stopped wearing both of them because it just ended up being too much on my wrist, more than I wanted to deal with. I didn't need all of that there when it was all in my pocket. Like, I don't know why this exists, but I love this. I can watch my own YouTube videos on this watch. Now that's a third-party app that probably shouldn't exist, but it does exist. And I don't know, I think that that's cool. Also from a capabilities perspective, the operating system on the Galaxy Watch I think is certainly the best operating system of any smartwatch. See, because this is a round watch face, when you bring up your apps like that, you use this dial to navigate your apps. And when you want to get into an app, you just kind of tap it in the middle. Now comparing that to the Apple Watch where you do have a dial, but it's this sort of, it is useful, but touching and rotating this tiny little crown isn't quite as intuitive as having one here.
So judging the capabilities of these devices is very hard because quantity, the amount of things it can do, is less important to the user than how well it can do the few things that are important to you. But the Garmin watch only does a few things, but it does them incredibly well. The Apple Watch does a lot of things, but I'm not sure how many of those things I'm going to actually use. Same with the Galaxy Watch. Does a lot of things, but how many of those things am I going to actually use? And this really underscores what is kind of my conclusion on this whole thing. When it comes to judging which watch is best for you, the first question is, what do you need it for?
And then last up, the easiest is battery life. So a regular watch, a quartz-timed battery-operated watch, batteries last several years. We'll just call that ever. The single most impressive part about the Garmin is that this thing, even though it has a full color screen, that's pretty low resolution and not that bright, but a full color screen, this battery, depending on how much you use the GPS, this battery will last you 2 weeks. If you use the GPS a lot, it'll last you like 5 days. The battery in this is incredibly impressive. So much so that when I travel, I typically don't bring the charger with me. The Apple Watch, they say it gets a full day. I don't know why they're so modest about this. I've only used it for a couple of days, but so far I get way more than a full day. It's not quite as good as the Galaxy Watch, which gives you 4 days, but I would say it's somewhere between the full day they advertise and the 4 days that this gives you.
This is it.
So the conclusion here is that it's very, very hard to objectively judge something like a smartwatch because it has a lot less to do with the technical capabilities and far more to do with what exactly are you looking for in something that lives on your wrist. I hate having to charge my cell phones every single day. And one of the reasons why I've never stuck with a smartwatch is because I hate having to also charge my watch every single day. I also have a tendency to break everything I touch, so the robustness of a watch is a big priority for me. There's been a lot of chatter about the Apple Watch. I think it's deserving of most of that chatter because it is a very impressive device. I do think this is the very best watch you could have on Android, even though it doesn't run Android operating system. So in conclusion, which is best? I don't know. It really depends on what you want. But what is exciting is that they're all pretty damn good. I wouldn't underestimate these more simple athletic watches. If you don't like a square on your wrist, I wouldn't underestimate what the Galaxy Watch can do. If you don't like carrying around a cell phone, I wouldn't underestimate what a smartwatch with an LTE chip in it could do. I think we've arrived at a very interesting place with wearables, and I'm excited about where they go next. That is it for this week's Tech Tuesday. We'll see you back here next Tuesday with a great new intro from Dan Mace.